Hilchos Ishus, Perek Chamisha ve'esrim, the laws of marriage, chapter 25. Today we finally conclude this first section of laws in the fourth book of the Rambam. The topic of today is that when a man marries a woman and new circumstances are revealed that he wasn't aware of before. Maybe it's physical issues, maybe it's other issues that are hovering over the woman like vows and the like. And the Rambam will talk about the details of the parameters, whether the husband can divorce the woman based on this assumption, maybe retroactively consider the marriage to be annulled, or he has to live with what he's got because he entered the marriage. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Hanoisei Isha Stam. A man marries a woman with no stipulations, no preconditions. The Nimtzu Allah Nadarim, and it's discovered that she has vows hanging over her. She had taken vows, she's prohibited to engage in certain acts or eat certain things. She forfeits her ksuba. She leaves the marriage, not the mainstay, not the addition, because she's not supposed to have vows on her. Which vows are we talking about? High-level vows. If the vows were not to eat meat, drink wine, or to wear colorful clothing or colorful ornaments, as we've actually seen these three concepts already earlier in the Rambam. Same law really would apply to any other specific jewelry which most women at that time would adorn themselves with. If another vow is hanging over her, not one of these three primary vows, it doesn't cause her to lose anything. Halacha beis v'chein hakainis isha stam. A man consummates a marriage with a woman, again with no preconditions. And it is discovered that she has a physical blemish, one of those which you've already explained that a woman shouldn't have or could be disqualifying. The husband was unaware of this blemish, he never heard about it, and he never desired this marriage explicitly. That's grounds enough to dismiss the woman without a ketubah, not the mainstay or the additional commitment. Ketzah, what does that look like? The husband would not know about a blemish. If there was a bathhouse in the city and he had relatives, the husband can never say, I was unaware of these blemishes, even if they are hidden blemishes in covered parts of the body. Because the assumption is, since there's a local bathhouse, the husband will check with his female relatives, ask them to check her out. And it's presumed that he heard and he desired to have the woman, nevertheless, her blemishes notwithstanding. But if there's no local bathhouse or he has no relatives, he can submit a claim about blemishes that were hidden in covered parts of her body. He could never have known about them. A woman who experiences epileptic outbursts, episodes at certain times, not consecutively or constantly, that's considered to be a blemish that's covered, that he wouldn't have known about unless he has somebody who could have checked that out for him. But if it's blemishes that are revealed, everybody can see them, and he can never submit a claim about them, because everybody sees them, everybody will tell him about them, and it's the presumption that he has heard about it and already appeased himself to the fact that he'll be married to her anyways. Now this is a well-known fact, that this law can only apply in those places where customarily women would go around in the market with their faces uncovered. And everybody would know them, everybody would say, Zuhi bita shel pleini, v'zuhi achresa shel pleini, this is this so-and-so's daughter, this is so-and-so's sister, like the people do in the lands of Edom. But if it's a locale where girls customarily don't even go out at all, even if a girl will go out to the bathhouse, she only goes out in the evening and disguised. Nobody will see her besides for her own relatives. The husband can submit a claim later, even about an obvious revealed blemish, because there's no other way for him to have seen it. Again, provided there was no bathhouse or female relative of his that could have checked her out. But even in a locale where women do not go out with their faces uncovered, if there was a local bathhouse, and he has a female relative, and he can no longer submit a claim, because every girl sees the other girls naked in the bathhouse, and they would have seen any possible bodily blemishes had there been one. If the customary of the girls was to behave disguised and to hide themselves even in the bathhouse, or girls used to wash themselves at night when it was dark, or within an enclosed shower area, let's call it an enclosed space, alone, shall never be seen, and the matter will never become known. So in this case, even if there's a local bathhouse and he has a female relative, he can submit a claim even about an obvious revealed blemish because there was no way for him to know. These are matters of reason, of simple logic. They're not the decree of the Torah. We're just relying on our brains here. Common sense will dictate these laws. By the way, there's a fascinating talk of the Rebbe where he says, look at earlier in the halacha, it says that if a person were to have had female relatives, chazaka sheshama v'ratza, he has heard and he has desired. It doesn't just say he has heard and he was okay with it. He heard and he desired. That means, in a way, the husband actually wants his wife looking this way for whatever reason. That's what's attractive to him. And the Rebbe says the same applies to God and the Jewish people. Hashem knew about our blemishes, and nevertheless He took us as His nation, which means that He wants us, not just that He's okay with us, but He wants us with our blemishes, because that allows us for us to do teshuvah, which can never happen if we just be straight, perfect tzaddikim. It's a fascinating lesson in our service of God. Halacha Gimel, Hoyru Miktas Hagainim. Some of the Geonim have issued a ruling. The idea that the sages said that a man will always check with his female relatives doesn't only apply to direct blood female relatives, even if he has close female friends, acquaintances, they can do the checking for him. And therefore, even if he's living in a city where there is no bathhouse, where there's no relative, if there's a bathhouse, and he can never submit a claim against the woman's bodily imperfections, because it's impossible that he has no friends, and at least he'll tell a friend, let his wife or his sister check out this girl who he wants to marry. And therefore we can presume that he already heard about it and he already appeased himself to marrying this woman with her imperfections. While this is what the Gaonim have said, it doesn't appear to be the truth to me, says the Rambam. People are very protective about their physical attractions and what exactly they're attracted to. He wouldn't reveal it to a friend of his just so his wife can go check out the girl. People don't say this stuff in public. Your relatives you trust, but other than that, the circle of trust is not so big. Only to his relatives. And furthermore, he'll only trust people who he's close with. So a friend's wife, to tell him information back, it's going to be broken telephone, he's not going to believe everything, and so later on it can cause a mess, and therefore this is not enough of a ruling to rely on, says the Rambam. Halacha Dalet. Ketzad hi taina samumin. How does one go about entering a claim about physical imperfections? So the Rambam says it depends on the category of the blemish. If the blemish which he's talking about that are found on her are mumin shevadei hayu b'kedem shetizareis, they are blemishes which were surely on her before the betrothal even happened, like an extra finger, it didn't grow from nowhere, it was always there. The onus of proof is on the father of the girl. He must prove that the husband was aware of them before the marriage, or at least that we can presume that he knew about them. If he brings no proof, she leaves the marriage with no payment. But if they were blemishes which possibly could have been born after the betrothal, now the husband's got to bring the proof. If they were only discovered after she entered the husband's possession, the husband has the burden of proof to prove that the blemish was on her before the engagement, in which case it was a mistaken transaction. If it was found on the woman while she was in her father's house, then it's on the father to bring the proof that the blemish came onto the woman after the betrothal, in which case his field is flooded. This is a halakhic expression which means he's an unlucky man. In other words, if the father can prove that the womb came after the betrothal, so that's it, you were already married to her, and your field was now flooded with the new blemish that came on later. But it's the father's prerogative, it's the father's obligation to prove that, because the womb was discovered while she was in her father's house. Halacha hey, hevi habal raya she'ad shalei tisares hayuba. If the husband indeed brings a proof that the woman had these blemishes before they got engaged, before the consecration, or she agrees, she admits it on her own. But the father brings a counter proof that the husband already knew about it, he was quiet, he was already appeased, or at least that you can presume that he knew about it. In this case, it's his proof against the father's proof. The husband must pay the ketubah money if he chooses to divorce her. Halacha vav ba'al ishtay. A man consummates the marriage, he has relations with his wife. V'shah kamal yamim. He waits a couple of days and only then enters the claim about a physical imperfection. V'tan shemum zel le'nir li'adata. And he says, I didn't see the blemish till now. Afilu hayad b'seich hakmata me b'kafar regel. Even if it was between wrinkles or on the bottom of the foot, in which case it's reasonable that what he's saying is true, ein shayman we don't listen to him. Chazaka, there's a presumption. She'ein adam sheisa b'kais aliyim kein beit kayafa. A man doesn't drink from a cup unless he checked it well. Now they've been together for a few days, we can presume that he already knows everything about it, and whatever he sees, he wants. A man marries a woman, and it turns out she doesn't have a fixed cycle, which could be very problematic for the laws of nida, of a menstruating woman. She doesn't even feel any premenstrual cramps. She simply just begins to bleed. She can only engage in relations with two cloths. I know edim usually means witnesses. Here it means cloths. Some pronounce it actually as edim. Which she must use to check herself before and after every relations. One before and one after the relations. That would be in addition to a cloth that must be used by the man, that he must use to clean himself after relations, as will be explained in the laws of forbidden relationships coming soon in the 5th book of the Rambam. Now, even though this is a very big blemish, you can't have an organic relationship. Every time you want to have relations, she has to check herself before and after. She doesn't forfeit anything. What's the problem? Let her check and have relations. What if she checked herself? They had relations. And then after the relations, as they're cleaning with the cloths, blood is discovered, either on his or on her cloth. If it happens 3 times, one after another in close proximity, she is now prohibited to be with her husband, because the assumption is that it's the relations which causes her to bleed, and she becomes a nida, which is a problematic type of marriage. She leaves the marriage with no ksuba payment at the main stand at the addition. Neither does she get any of the conditions that the ksuba is contingent on. She cannot have relations, which is one of the main purposes of marriage. If she can't provide that for her husband, he need not provide her with a ketubah. He must divorce her, never to remarry her. Because maybe she'll get healed in the interim. Which would then retroactively mean that he never meant to divorce her when he actually divorced her. She can marry another man, as will be explained when it comes to the menstruating woman laws, but she can never remarry him. Otherwise, the whole divorce is called into question. Halacha tes b'medvarim amurim. When do we say this law? When the matter was such from the beginning of the marriage, already the first relations she saw this blood. But if this sickness descends upon her after the marriage, he's an unlucky man. His field has flooded. It's a new blemish that comes later. Therefore, if he had relations even once, with no blood sighting, and then she begins to see blood every single time of relations, he must divorce her, but he must also pay out the ketubah. Never to return her again, as we just explained. If a woman gets new blemishes, new bodily imperfections after the marriage, even if she becomes full of boils, if he wants to keep her, he can keep her. But the moment he wants to end the marriage, since the bodily imperfection came later, he must pay out the ketubah payment. What if a man gets bodily imperfections after marriage? Even if his hand is chopped off, his foot is chopped off, he's blinded. And and the wife no longer wants to be with him, we actually don't force the man in this case to end the marriage and pay out the ketubah. If she wants, she can stay in the marriage. If she doesn't want, it's too bad. She must leave with no ketubah money, like any rebellious woman. Just leaving your husband because he has a physical imperfection of this type is unacceptable. But if something unbearable happens, he begins to have terrible breath or terrible smell from his nose, or he took on a job that makes him super smelly, he collects dog manure, or he mines copper, or he tans skins, we force him to divorce and to pay the ketubah. Only if she wants, she can stay with him, but otherwise it's physically unbearable. We don't force her, and he must pay the ketubah if he does dissolve the marriage. If the man becomes full of boils, we do force him to divorce and to pay the ketubah. Even if she wants to stay with him, we don't listen to her. We separate them forcibly because she will ultimately completely erode his body if she continues having relations with him in this state of having boils. So it's going to lead to really no good. We end the marriage. If she says, if she promises, I'm going to sit with him, we'll have constant watch of witnesses, we'll never have relations, then we listen to her and they can stay in the marriage. If a woman has a husband who has an unbearable smell, either by breath or by the nose, or he's a collector of dog manure or something like that, in which case she's allowed to, if she wants, stay in the marriage. Then he dies. Then she falls to the brother in Yibum, in levirate marriage. He has the same problem. He also has a bad smell. He also has a terrible smelling job. She can say to him, I could handle your brother, I can't handle you. And the court will compel him to do chalitza, the other way out of levirate marriage, and also pay up the ketubah. And the Rambam ends off with the verse, may you see children to your children. This is in Tehillim, causing much peace to the Jewish people. Some commentators say it's just, a good ending, a nice little ending talking about marriage. You should have many children. The Rebbe once explained that it's in direct continuation to the last halacha. Remember back a couple of chapters, we talked about a woman who was with her husband for 10 years, and they didn't have children. So if she wants to get out, before 10 years, a woman says, you know what, my husband's not performing in the bedroom, I need to get out of the marriage before 10 years comes. The court would actually do their best to convince her to stay in the marriage till 10 years. So over here also, why don't we try to convince her? Yeah, you handle the brother, handle the new husband as well. So the Rebbe says that's the remez, that's the hint here in this verse. Or try to make more children, try to have this marriage go through so the dead brother will have his children through his live brother, which will cause Shalom al Yisrael, which will cause peace to the Jews. In other words, we do try to convince the woman, even though the Rambam doesn't write it clearly because he doesn't write anything that's not clear in the Talmud. But he hints it that in order to increase peace, we do our best to convince marriages to stay together. And with that, blessed is the merciful one granted us assistance. We conclude with this, Mazal Tov for concluding the laws of marriage.